Start my dead brother's race car, and I will erase every dollar you owe in this world." That is what the richest man in the state said to me, a tow truck driver with grease under his nails and a past due notice folded in his back pocket. He said it in a cold, quiet garage in front of a car that had not run in 9 years. And then he did something strange. He reached into his coat and he set a small, bent coin down on the workbench between us, like it was the most valuable thing in the building. He thought he was testing me. He thought he was watching a poor man decide whether he could fake his way through a job too big for him. What he did not know was that I had seen that exact bent coin before, a long time ago. In another life, in the hand of a man he had loved more than anything in the world. By the time the night was over, that coin would tell a truth that this billionaire had spent 9 years refusing to hear, and I would be the only person alive who could give it to him. But before I tell you what happened in that garage, do me one quick favor. If you have ever been the person that important people look straight through, the one whose name they never bother to learn, hit that subscribe button right now. This whole channel is built for the people the world walks right past. Go on. I'll wait. Now let me take you back to the start because none of this makes sense until you understand a broken-down tow truck, an empty chair at my kitchen table, and a phone call that came in at 2 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday in October. My name is Danny Reyes. I am 40 years old, and I drive a tow truck for a living. I run one truck, an old flatbed with a winch that groans and a heater that only works when it feels like it. I pull cars out of ditches. I jump dead batteries on cold mornings. I haul wrecks off the highway at 3 in the morning while the rain comes down sideways. It is not a job that anybody dreams about as a kid. It is not a job that gets you a second look at a fancy party. But I will tell you something that took me a long time to understand. A tow truck driver sees people on the worst day of their lives, almost every single time. Nobody calls me because they are having a good day. They call me because their car died, or they crashed it, or they are stranded somewhere dark and scared with their kids in the back seat. And when you meet people on their worst day, over and over for 20 years, you learn something the rest of the world misses. You learn that everybody is carrying something heavy. The fancy ones, the broke ones, all of them. The expensive car in the ditch and the rusted one both have a frightened human being inside, and most people never bother to look close enough to see it. That, right there, is most of the story. Everything else is just details. I am raising my nephew. His name is Marcus, and he is 8 years old, and he is mine now. Not in the simple way, but in every way that counts when a kid wakes up crying at midnight and needs somebody to be there. My brother, Eli, was Marcus's father. Eli died 4 years ago. I am not going to spend a lot of time on how, because it still sits heavy on me, but I will tell you this much. Eli was the best man I ever knew, and the day I lost him was the day I quietly became somebody's whole world without being even a little bit ready for it. Nobody is ever ready. I was less ready than most, but you do it anyway, because the other choice does not exist. And somewhere in the doing of it, the not being ready slowly turns into the most important thing you will ever be. So it has been me and Marcus for 4 years now. He rides along in the truck on the days I cannot find anyone to watch him, with his comic books and his headphones and a little toy race car that his dad gave him before he died. Marcus keeps that toy car in his pocket every single day. He sleeps with it under his pillow. It is a small thing, painted bright blue, with a tiny white number 7 on the door. He has never once told me why number 7 matters to him. I never asked. Some things a kid should get to keep for himself. Marcus is, without any competition, the best thing I have ever done with my life. But I will be honest with you about the money, because the money is why I was standing in that cold garage in the first place. Things had gotten bad, real bad. My truck needed a new transmission I could not afford. There had been a slow few months. Then Marcus got sick. Over the winter, and even with the cheap insurance I had, the bills piled up in a way that made my stomach drop every time I opened the mailbox. I owed money to people who do not forget that you owe them. I was 3 weeks from losing the truck, which meant losing the only way I had to make money, which meant losing everything. I had a past due notice in my back pocket the night this story starts. Folded up small, like making it small could make it matter less. A man raising a kid alone, with the bottom falling out, does not get to be too proud to take a strange job. You owe it to the kid to at least listen. The call came in at 2 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in October. I almost did not answer it. Marcus was asleep in his room, and I had a rule about night jobs when he was home alone. But the number was a local one, and 2 a.m. is exactly when desperate people need a tow, and I needed the work too badly to let it ring out. The voice on the other end was calm and even. A man's voice, older, used to being obeyed. He did not say hello, he said, "Is this Daniel Reyes, the man who tows cars?" I said it was. He said, "I have a job for you, not a tow, something else. It pays more than you make in a year. I need you to come to an address tonight, right now, and look at a car for me. If you can do what I need, your money problems are over. All of them." I should have hung up. A voice in the middle of the night promising to fix all your problems is usually a scam or worse. But there was something in the way he said it. No excitement, no hard sell. Just a flat, tired certainty, like a man who had stopped expecting anything good to happen and was making one last call into the dark. I asked him how he knew about my money problems. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "I make it my business to know things about people before I hire them. You are about to lose your truck. You have a child in your care. You are exactly the kind of man I am looking for, because you cannot afford to say no, and a man who cannot afford to say no will actually try." I did not like that answer, but I could not say it was wrong. I got my neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, to come sit in my apartment so Marcus would not be alone. She is a kind woman who has known Marcus since he was small, and she did not even complain about the hour. She just came over in her robe with a book and waved me out the door. I drove the address he gave me, way out past the edge of the city, down a long private road, up to a set of gates that opened before I even reached them, like somebody was watching me come. The house at the end of that road was not really a house. It was the kind of place that does not need to announce itself because everything about it is already screaming money in a low, quiet voice. But the man was not waiting in the house. A guard pointed me around the side, down a sloping drive, to a separate garage that was bigger than the whole apartment building I lived in. The door was already open. Warm light spilled out into the cold rain. And standing inside, in a dark coat, with his hands in his pockets, was a man I recognized immediately, because his face had been on the cover of every business magazine in the country at one point or another. Victor Hale. If you follow business news even a little, you know the name. He built a logistics empire from nothing, a network of trucks and warehouses and shipping that moves a huge piece of everything you buy. He was worth billions. He was famous for being cold, sharp, and completely impossible to read. And he was standing alone in a garage at 2:30 in the morning, looking at me like I was the last option on a very long list. "You came," he said. He sounded almost surprised. "You said it paid," I said. "I came." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he turned and looked at the thing in the middle of the garage, and I followed his eyes, and for a second I forgot about the money and the rain and everything else. It was a race car, not a new one, an old one, a real one. Low and wide and mean-looking, painted a deep racing green that had gone dull with time and dust. It sat under a single bright light like something in a museum, except a museum would have kept it cleaner. This car had been sitting a long while. You could tell. There was a film of dust on it, and the tires had gone soft and flat at the bottoms, and there was that particular stillness that machines get when nobody has loved them in years. And on the door, in faded white paint, was a number. 7. I want to be honest with you. My heart did something strange when I saw that number, but I did not understand why yet, not yet. That came later. This car, Victor Hale said, belonged to my brother, Thomas, my younger brother. He built it himself mostly. He raced it. It was the only thing in his life he loved more than the business we were supposed to build together. He paused. Thomas died 9 years ago. This car has not run since the last day he drove it. I have had the best mechanics in the country in this garage. Men who work on machines worth more than your whole neighborhood. Not one of them could start it. It turns over and it dies. Every time. They tell me it is the fuel system, the timing, the electronics, a dozen different things. They replace parts, it dies. I have spent more money trying to start this car than most men make in a lifetime, and it will not start. I looked at the car. I looked at him. Why do you want it started so bad? I asked. Something moved across his face. He covered it fast, but I caught it. 20 years of meeting people on their worst day, you learn to catch it. That is not your concern, he said. Here is the deal. You start that car tonight, you hear it run just once, and every debt you have in this world disappears in the morning. I will buy your debt and burn it. You walk out of here a free man. If you fail, you go home, and you have lost nothing but a night's sleep. Those are the terms. It did not make sense. A man like this could hire anyone. Why a tow truck driver at 2 in the morning? I asked him exactly that. And that is when he reached into his coat. He took out a small object and set it down on the workbench between us, under the light, careful, like he was setting down something holy. I leaned in to look at it. It was a coin, an old one, worn smooth, and it was bent right down the middle into a soft curve, the way a coin gets when it has been run over or pressed in a vise or struck by something hard. There was a small hole drilled through the top, like it had once hung on a string. My brother carried this every day of his life, Victor Hale said. He had it on him the day he died. The mechanics I hired, the experts, the rich men's sons who fix rich men's cars, I showed it to every one of them. I asked each of them what they thought it was. They all said the same thing. Junk. A ruined coin, worthless. And every single one of them failed to start the car. He looked up at me, and his eyes were hard and searching. So I stopped hiring experts. I started looking for a different kind of man. A man who has had to know the worth of small, ugly, broken things. And the people I asked kept pointing me toward men like you. He slid the coin an inch closer to me. Tell me, Mr. Reyes, you have spent your life around busted machines and busted people. Look at that and tell me what you see. And do not lie to me, because I will know. I looked down at the bent coin, and the floor dropped out of the world. Because I had seen that coin before, not one like it, that one. I knew the bend of it. I knew the little hole drilled through the top. I knew it the way you know a face you loved a long time ago. Ivan after years. Ivan in a crowd. My brother Eli had carried a coin exactly like that. Bent the same way. Hole drilled the same way. He had worn it on a bootlace around his neck for as long as I could remember, And when I was a kid and asked him about it, he told me a story I had not thought about in 20 years. He told me that when he was young, before I was old enough to understand any of it, he had a best friend. A guy he worked with at a garage across town when they were both barely out of their teens. Both broke, both crazy about engines, both dreaming of building something. The two of them used to street race and tinker and stay up all night with their heads under the hood of whatever wreck they could afford. And one night, the two of them found an old penny that had been run over, flat and bent on the train tracks. And being two dumb, broke kids who had nothing, they decided it was lucky. They could not afford two, so they pressed it in a vise until it bent clean down the middle, and then they were going to break it in half and each take a piece, but it would not break. No matter what they did, that stubborn bent coin would not split in two. And Eli always laughed when he told this part. He said his friend looked at the coin that would not break and said, "Then I guess we are stuck together, brother. One coin, two halves, can't split it. Whoever's holding it, the other one's never far." They drilled a little hole in it, and they took turns carrying it. And then life happened, the way it does. They drifted. The friend went off to chase something bigger. Eli stayed broke and happy and small. And somewhere in there, the friend gave Eli the coin to keep for good and said, "You hold it." So neither of us is ever really alone. Eli wore that coin until the day he died, and it was buried with him. I put it around his neck myself, in the funeral home, with my own two shaking hands, 4 years ago. So the coin sitting on the workbench in front of me was not Eli's coin. It could not be. Eli's was in the ground, which meant there had been two coins after all. One stubborn bent penny that two broke kids could not break in half, so they each kept one whole one, made the same way, the same night, with the same drilled hole. Two halves of one promise. One coin in the ground with my brother, and one coin sitting on a billionaire's workbench that had belonged to his dead brother Thomas, Eli's best friend, the one who went off to chase something bigger, Thomas Hale. I stood there in that cold garage, and I understood all at once that my dead brother and this man's dead brother had been the two broke kids in that story. That somewhere, 30 years ago, before the billions, before the empire, before any of it, Thomas Hale and Eli Reyes had been nobodies together with their heads under a hood, too broke to buy two lucky coins. I did not say any of this out loud. Not yet, I could not. My throat had closed up. Victor Hale was watching my face like a hawk. "You see something," he said quietly, "don't you?" The others looked at it like it was trash. "You're looking at it like it's a ghost." I made myself breathe. I picked up the coin. It was lighter than I expected, and warm from his hand, and holding it felt like holding a piece of my own brother across a gap of 9 years, and a dead man I had never met. "Mr. Hale," I said, and my voice came out rough. "Before I answer you, I need to ask you some questions about your brother. And I need you to be honest with me, the same way you asked me to be honest with you." He frowned. This was not how the night was supposed to go. He was supposed to ask the questions. I was supposed to be the desperate man performing for the rich one, but something in my voice stopped him. "Ask," he said. "When your brother was young," I said, "before all this, before you built the company, was there a time when he was broke, when he worked in a garage, when he had nothing?" Victor Hale went very still. "How could you possibly know that?" he said. "Just answer me, please." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said slowly, "Yes, before I made any money. Thomas and I came from nothing. But Thomas, he was the one who loved the engines. When we were young, before I pulled us up, he worked in some garage across town for next to nothing. He was happy there. happier than he ever was later, if I'm honest with myself, which I usually am not. He stopped. I pulled him out of that. I told him we were going to build something real, something big, that fixing other men's cars for scraps was beneath us. He came with me. He always came with me. He was my little brother. His jaw tightened. I think at the end he hated that I pulled him out. I think this car was the one piece of that old life he kept for himself. The one thing that was his and not ours. The pieces were falling into place now, fast and heavy. "Did your brother ever talk about a friend?" I asked. "From back then, from the garage days, a best friend." And Victor Hale's face changed in a way I will never forget. The hard businessman mask cracked straight down the middle, the same way that coin was bent, and underneath it was just a grieving older brother who had never gotten to say the thing he needed to say. "There was a name," he said softly. "He used to talk about a friend, back when we were young. I never met him. I never wanted to. I thought that whole part of Thomas's life was something to leave behind." He swallowed. "I have spent 9 years wishing I had paid attention, wishing I knew who his people really were. The man at his funeral I should have called. The friend I should have found. Thomas kept that part of himself away from me, and I think it's because I made it so clear I thought it was beneath us." He looked at the coin in my hand. "Why are you asking me this? Who are you?" I set the coin down gently on the bench, and I made a decision that I have never once regretted, even though it cost me, in that moment, the only thing I had come there to get. Continued in the next part, I told him the truth. "My name is Danny Reyes," I said, "and I think your brother Thomas was the best friend of my brother Eli. I think they were the two broke kids in that garage 30 years ago. I think they found a bent penny on the train tracks one night and decided it was lucky, and they couldn't afford two, so they made 2 coins the same way, the same night, with a little hole drilled in each one. One for each of them, so neither one would ever be alone." I pointed at the coin on the bench. "That's Thomas's, I know it, because my brother Eli wore the other one around his neck every day of his life, and I buried it with him 4 years ago, with my own hands. The garage was so quiet I could hear the rain on the roof. Victor Hale did not say anything for a long, long time. He stared at the coin like it had just spoken to him in his dead brother's voice. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet, and he did not bother to hide it. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that your brother is the friend, the one Thomas talked about, the one I refused to know." "I'm telling you they were brothers," I said, "not by blood, but brothers. The way your brother and I would probably never have understood until tonight." I felt my own eyes burn. "Thomas told your brother he'd keep that coin, so neither one of them would ever really be alone. And my brother told me the exact same words about the exact same coin. They were carrying the same promise on 2 different necks for 30 years, and neither one of them ever broke it. And then Victor Hale, the billionaire, the cold man on the magazine covers, the man who could buy and sell whole towns, sat down hard on a workbench stool and put his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook, and he cried the way a man cries when something he has held shut for 9 years finally cracks open. I did not say anything. I have met a lot of people on their worst day. You learn that the kindest thing you can do is just be there and not fill the silence. So I just stood there with him, 2 strangers in a cold garage, while the rain came down and a dead race car sat between us with the number 7 on the door. After a while, he wiped his face, rough, like he was angry at the tears, and he said, "The car. Do you understand the car now?" And the strange thing is, I did. All at once, I understood the car. "Mr. Hale," I said, "your experts couldn't start this car because they were trying to fix a machine, but there's nothing wrong with the machine. I'd bet my truck on it. I walked over to the car and put my hand on the green hood, gentle, the way I'd touch a scared animal. Your brother built this car himself. A man who builds a car himself doesn't fix it the way the manual says. He fixes it the way that makes sense to him. There's always a trick, a thing only the builder knows. A switch wired backwards, a fuel line that has to be primed by hand, a sequence you have to do in the right order. The experts don't know the trick because they didn't build it and they never met the man. They keep replacing good parts because they're looking for a problem that isn't there. I looked at the coin on the bench, and I thought about my brother, and the way he used to fix things, and a memory floated up that I hadn't touched in 20 years. My brother had a habit, I said slowly. When he built something himself, he'd hide the trick somewhere that meant something to him. Said a thing worth keeping should be hard to start for a stranger and easy for the one who loves it. I turned and looked at the car. If Thomas was anything like Eli, and I think he was exactly like Eli, then the secret to starting this car isn't in the engine. It's somewhere that mattered to him, somewhere personal. Victor Hale stood up. "Where?" he said. I walked slowly around the car. I looked at everything, and then I saw it, and I almost laughed, and I almost cried. Mounted on the dashboard, near the ignition, there was a small metal bracket. Empty, about the size of a coin. With a little post on it, the kind a coin, with a hole drilled in it, would slide right onto. "Bring me the coin," I said. Victor Hale picked the bent coin up off the bench like it was made of glass, and he carried it over, and he put it in my hand. And I slid it onto that little post on the dashboard, and it fit, perfect, like it had been made for that exact spot. Because it had. And right behind where the coin sat, hidden until the coin was in place, there was a tiny toggle switch. You could not even see it unless the coin was mounted and you were looking from the driver's seat. A kill switch. A homemade anti-theft trick. The car would turn over forever and never catch, because the fuel pump was cut off, and the only way to flip that switch back on was to be sitting in the driver's seat, with the coin in its place, looking right at it. The car could not be started by a stranger. It could only be started by someone who had the coin, and knew it belonged on the dash, and loved the man enough to put it back where it went. Thomas hadn't built a car. He'd built a lock that only his own heart could open. I flipped the switch. "Get in," I told Victor Hale. "It's your brother's car. You start it." He shook his head. "I don't know how. I never learned. Thomas was the one who—" "I'll talk you through it," I said. "Get in." And the billionaire climbed into his dead brother's race car like a nervous teenager, and I leaned in the window and told him which pedal and how long to prime it, and when to turn the key. And he turned it. The engine coughed again, and then it caught, and it roared to life, loud and angry and alive, filling that whole garage with a sound that 9 years of expensive mechanics had never been able to make. The whole car shook. The dust jumped off the hood, and over the noise of his dead brother's engine running for the first time in 9 years, Victor Hale put his head down on the steering wheel and wept, with the bent coin glowing under the dashboard light, finally back in its place. I stepped back and let him have it. That moment wasn't mine. It was theirs. 2 dead brothers and a promise that wouldn't break. Finally finishing a conversation that started 30 years ago in a garage across town. After a long time, he shut the engine off. The silence that came after felt different than the silence before. Lighter, somehow. He got out of the car slowly. He was holding himself differently. He walked over to me, and he put out his hand, and I shook it. "You did it," he said. "You did the thing nobody could do. The deal is the deal. In the morning, every debt you have is gone. You're free, Mr. Reyes. You earned it 10 times over. And here is the place where I did the one thing that I don't think Victor Hale ever saw coming. I said no. I said, I'm not going to take it. He stared at me. What? I'll take payment for the night, I said. Fair payment for a working man's time. But I'm not going to let you erase all my debts for this. I can't. Why not? He said, and he sounded almost angry. It's nothing to me. You need it. You have a child. Why would you refuse? And I told him the truth, because by then we'd gone past the place where you tell each other anything but the truth. Because the second you pay me a fortune for this, I said, it turns into a transaction. And it isn't one. I didn't start that car because you offered me money. I started it because your brother and my brother carried the same promise for 30 years, and tonight I got to be the one who put that coin back where it belonged. That's not a thing I'll sell you. If I take a fortune for it, then, for the rest of my life, I won't be able to tell my nephew this story without it being about the money. And I need it to be about the brothers. Because that boy lost his dad, and someday I'm going to tell him that his father and a man named Thomas Hale loved each other so much they couldn't break a coin in half. And I can't tell him that story straight if I cashed it in for a check. Victor Hale looked at me for a very long time, and then, quietly, he said, Your brother, Eli, he left a son? He did, I said. Marcus, he's 8. He carries a little blue toy race car with the number 7 on the door, everywhere he goes. His dad gave it to him before he died. My voice cracked. I never understood the number 7 until tonight. And Victor Hale looked over at his brother's car, at the faded white 7 on the green door, and the last piece of it landed on both of us at the same time. Thomas's race car was number 7. Eli gave his son a toy race car, number 7, before he died. 2 brothers who weren't brothers, leaving the same number to the next generation. A private little message neither of them was alive to explain. Victor Hale sat down again. Not because he was sad this time, because some things are too heavy to take standing up. Even the good things. I have spent 9 years, he said, thinking I failed my brother by pulling him out of that old life, by making him think it was beneath us. And tonight a tow truck driver shows up at 2 in the morning and tells me that the part of Thomas's life I was ashamed of was the part that gave him the only real family he ever had outside of me. He shook his head. I owe your brother a debt I can never pay. He was the friend I should have known. He gave my brother something I was too proud to give him. Now, I told you at the start that this is not a fairy tale, and I meant it, so let me tell you the true part, which is better than a fairy tale anyway. I did take payment for that night. Fair payment, like I said, enough to fix my transmission and breathe for a month. Not a penny more. We argued about it. I won. It is the only argument I have ever won against a billionaire, and I think, looking back, he let me win it on purpose because my refusing the fortune was the one thing that proved to him I'd never been in it for the money in the first place. But here's the thing about a man like Victor Hale. You can stop him from handing you a check. You cannot stop him from being decent once his heart cracks open. He could not give me money because I would not let him. So instead, he found other ways. Quiet ways. The kind a proud man can't refuse without being cruel. A few weeks later, a scholarship fund appeared, in Thomas Hale's name and Eli Reyes's name together, for the children of mechanics and tradesmen, kids of the working people the world looks straight past. The first name on the list of recipients, set up years in advance so it could never be taken away, was Marcus Reyes. My nephew's whole future, college and trade school and whatever else he ever wanted, paid for, in his father's name, alongside the name of a man his father loved. I couldn't say no to that. It wasn't for me, it was for the brothers. And it had both their names on it. Victor Hale and I are friends now. Real friends. The unlikely kind. He calls me sometimes late at night when the big, quiet house gets to be too much, and we talk about nothing, the way you can only talk to somebody who's seen you cry. He's a different man than the one on those magazine covers. Or maybe he was always this man underneath, and it just took losing his brother and finding mine to crack the shell off. He gave me the bent coin. He pressed it into my hand one day and said, "This belongs with the other one. With family. Thomas would want it carried by someone who understands what it means." I tried to refuse that too. He wouldn't let me. So now I carry Thomas Hale's bent coin, and somewhere in the ground my brother carries his, and the promise is still unbroken, 30 years and 2 graves later. And Marcus, my Marcus. I waited until the right night, and then I sat my nephew down and I told him the whole story, about his dad and a man named Thomas, and 2 broke kids in a garage, and a coin that wouldn't break in half no matter what they did to it, so they each carried one so neither of them would ever be alone. I told him why the number 7 mattered. I told him his father had loved a friend so much that they'd left the same number to their kids without ever explaining it, like a secret handshake passed down to the next generation. And Marcus took his little blue toy car out of his pocket, the one with the number 7. And he looked at it for a long, long time. And then he asked me if he could see the real car someday, the green one, his dad's friend's car. So I called Victor Hale. And the next weekend, my 8-year-old nephew stood in that big, warm garage and put his small hand on the green hood of a race car with the number 7 on the door. And Victor Hale knelt down next to him, this billionaire, on the cold concrete floor, and told a fatherless boy stories about the man who built it. Stories about Thomas. Stories that turned out to have Marcus's own dad in them, woven all the way through. Marcus has a whole second family now. An old man who tells him stories about his father that I was never even there to see. That's the whole prize. That's the entire jackpot. Everything else is just details and paperwork. There's a version of that night where I take the money, where I let Victor Hale erase all my debts and I drive home a free man, and maybe it even works out fine. And there is no version of that night where I do that and also get to sit my nephew down and tell him the truth straight, with nothing bought and nothing owed, just one true story about how much his father was loved. I picked the true thing. I'd pick it every single time. I still drive my tow truck. People ask me why, now that things are easier. But I think about all those people I meet on the worst day of their lives, stranded in the dark, scared, sure that nobody sees them. And I think maybe the most important thing I can do is be the one guy who shows up at 2 a.m. and treats them like they matter. Because you never know who's carrying a bent coin in their pocket. You never know what promise is sitting inside the busted, ugly, worthless-looking thing that everybody else walked right past. So let me ask you one thing before you go. Everybody who looked at that coin saw junk. Experts, rich men, men who fix machines worth millions. They all saw a worthless, broken little thing, and they threw it aside. And it turned out to be the one key that could start an engine that 9 years of money couldn't touch, because they were looking at what it was worth instead of who it belonged to. So, here is what I honestly want to know from you tonight. Who is the person in your life that everybody else walked right past, but you saw? The one the world threw aside as not worth much. Who turned out to be the whole key to everything? And have you ever told them what they meant to you? Tell me about them down in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story got to you tonight, if you believe, like I've come to believe, that the most worthless-looking things are sometimes carrying the biggest promises, then do me that one small favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Drop a like so the next person can find their way here. Leave your story down below, and I'll see you in the very next one. Trust me, it's a good one.